Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a special work session regarding the budget for the Kernersville Board of Aldermen for the upcoming fiscal year. We will begin. First, I'd like to welcome everyone here. And second, I'd like to let you know we'll begin by an invocation given by Alderman J.R. Gorham. Okay. Please rise.
If you don't mind, we will bow our heads. Lord, we just thank you for this day that you have made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. We thank you for this opportunity to come together to discuss the budget of our beloved community, Kernersville. We thank you for everyone who is in attendance today. We ask for your wisdom, your guidance, and your knowledge as we go through with making these decisions pertaining to the budget. We thank you for what you have done for us. We thank you for what you're doing for us right now. And we thank you for those things yet to manifest in our lives. And for that, we give your name praise, honor, and glory. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag Thank you. You may be seated. All right, Mr. Swisher is our town manager, and he's been working with the department heads on a proposed budget for several months now, and has briefed the board along the way about various issues facing the town that may impact the upcoming year and the upcoming years. But this is our opportunity to have a discussion of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-2023. The budget public hearing will be held next week on Tuesday, June 7th. Mr. Swisher, would you like to tell us about the budget that you and the department heads have prepared?
Madam Mayor and Board, as the Mayor mentioned, you each have a copy of the budget. I'll go through some highlights of that budget, and then, as the Mayor mentioned, next week will be the public hearing. And since this is live streamed and will be available between now and next Tuesday, I will not cover a lot of this again at the public hearing. As I've done in the past, the public hearing will be much shorter from my end, and then the citizens that wish will have a chance to come up and ask questions and address anything regarding the budget. So what I'll do tonight is I'll cover the revenues, the general revenues, and then I'll cover the expenses that relate to every department, and then I'll go through each department and highlight just some of the changes in that department. So should get done, 6:15, 6:30, so that we can roll into the next meeting. Starting off the budget, as you can see in there in the revenues, the budget this year is $43,200,846. That's a little higher than last year, but almost $3.2 million of that is for the station renovations at Beeson's. They were in the budget last year, but it was as a lease payment instead of a capital installment purchase payment. So it's what we had to do is, now that the town is doing those renovations, we'll borrow the money and do those. Last year, Beeson's was actually doing the renovations, and we were just going to make the payments on the loan. So now we have the loan. So that's in there. That's what made the budget what it is. Without that, the budget would have been about $40 million for this fiscal year. And as you can see, last year, the approved budget was $41,594,000. That included some substantial capital projects as well. Starting on the revenues, the property tax revenue is up this year to $20,200,000. That's an increase from roughly $18,700,000 last year. The total tax base for the town now, and this is all property, personal and real property, and for Forsyth and Guilford County, the total tax base is $3.647 billion. Last year it was $3.36 billion. A lot of that comes from an increase in the tax base in Guilford County. And we'll tell you, and it's covered in the budget message, that the Guilford County had a tax revaluation this year. They had a property revaluation, and we're required by law to address the revenue neutral. We've done that in the budget message. we're not recommending setting the rate to the revenue neutral rate based on Guilford County because only about 10 to 11% of Kernersville is in Guilford County. That rate was changed last year when we adjusted for revenue neutral and for Forsyth County. Those folks in Guilford County saw their rate for Kernersville go down. So we're not recommending that. And if we did, the revenue neutral rate, depending on the growth factor that you use, would be somewhere between 54.8 and 56.4. We are recommending leaving our tax rate at the current rate of 55.9 cents per $100 valuation. So they had a revaluation in Guilford County, and we saw about a boost of about $965,000 in revenue from that. Our tax base went up substantially. Our sales and use tax this year, as you can see in that column, and I think I've mentioned it to all of you, there's two columns in the budget that are relevant to this year. That's the departmental request column and the manager recommend column. The budget's based on the manager recommend column. The departmental request column is what the department head submitted. A lot of the times, a lot of the line items are the same for each of those, especially in the revenues. I don't think any of those changed. But in some of the different departments, some of the departmental requests changed one way or the other. But our sales and use tax, we're recommending $7.966 million. That is up from last year. Last year, we budgeted $6.62 million. It looks like a big jump, but when you look over into the estimated column for 21-22, we are estimating collecting about $7.6 million. So we budgeted on the low side last year, and we're going to collect more than what we budgeted. We're anticipating collecting more. So this year, when we came in, we're just a little bit above what we anticipate collecting for 21-22. The other tax that you see revenue you see a slight increase in is the utility franchise tax. It's going from $1.58 million to $1.64 million. The installment purchase, loans for installment purchase, it's up from $3.3 million to $5.45 million. And again, that's mainly because of the loan for Beeson's Crossroads. Without that, we would be down to about $2.2 million, which is less than last year. That indicates that we are purchasing less capital equipment than we did in 21-22. I'll cover that when we get to the expenses, but that is by design pretty much. In the restricted intergovernmental revenues, which is page 2 of the general fund revenues, the ones that are zeroed out, some of those that are zeroed out where it says due from MPO, due from CCUC, those are zeroed out this year, may have had an amount in there last year. That is projects that we did last year, and we received some grant reimbursement money from one of those agencies. We didn't have that project this year, so there's nothing in that column to reflect that. Some of the larger projects that we're looking at doing, we do not have in the budget yet, so you don't see the revenue with it and you don't see the expense with it. Reason being is that those projects sometimes go into multi-year projects. You know, we put them in the budget 1 year. It's 2 or 3 years down the road before they ever get started, before we ever get the money. And we've had to show that project in the budget. And really it's just, you know, from an accounting standpoint and a budgeting standpoint, it's easier to put it in there when the project comes up. Under functionally related revenues, these are revenues that primarily the town generates through some type of permitting fee, garbage collection, commercial garbage collecting, building inspections, recreation revenues, things like that. But it's all revenues that's generated by the town. In those, building inspections went up a little bit from 577 to 616. Our commercial and industrial collection is coming down. It was 550 in 21-22. We're anticipating 292. The reason for that is back in, I think, 1920, fiscal year 1920, the board voted to eliminate the commercial solid waste collection. That's all the dumpsters you see at the businesses in town. We're phasing that out, so our collections, our revenue from that is going down our expenses are going down with it. On that side, they should pretty much match up when it's all said and done. Recreation revenues, they're up slightly from last year. This is from the rental of facilities, programming, things like that. The rent on the communication towers, it went down about $18,000, went from 203 to 185. The reason on that, we had one of our cellular providers that was on the tower down at Public Services did not renew their lease on the tower. And I think it was about $18,000 a year, somewhere in there. We had some leases go up, but with that one coming off, overall, it was a net loss on that of about $18,000. Page 3 of the revenues, operating grants and contributions, the contracted fire services, that is the service that we provide Walkertown. We have an agreement with Walkertown to cover a portion of their fire district, and for that they pay us $18,000 a year. The school resource officer program, Kernersville provides SROs at the middle schools and high schools in Kernersville, and that's the amount of reimbursement that we get from the county for that program. And then over on the next page, on the last page of the general fund revenues, you'll see down in the very bottom, the fund balance appropriated this year. We're recommending no fund balance appropriated to start with. Most likely we'll end up with some, but we're not proposing starting out with any. You can see last year it was $560,000. It probably won't be the 3.2 million, but it'll end up a little bit more than that for 21-22. And again, we are recommending leaving the tax rate at 55.9 cents to generate that revenue. So that's all on the revenue side. The expenses, we've got several expenses that apply basically to all departments, and with the exception of maybe governing body, which is you all, that's your budget for your department. The biggest recommendation that we have in this budget this year, aside from everything, whether it's equipment, capital improvements or anything, the biggest recommendation that we're making is a cost of living adjustment of 6%. I covered that in my budget message, but most years we've done a 2%, sometimes a 3%, whether it be a cost of living or whether it's a merit. This year we're recommending 6%, mainly because inflation, I think for the month in March of 2022, inflation for the year was about 8.5%. So 2% is not really going to cover a whole lot. 6% still lagging a little bit behind the inflation, but we think 6% is a good cost of living adjustment. That's pretty much what a lot of the municipalities around us have done. I've seen the lowest I've seen, I think, is 4.5%, and it goes all the way up to about 8%. So when you think about it in terms of how much it's costing someone that works here, we've got folks that may drive, 20, 30 miles one way to work. And so they're burning roughly a tank of gas a week. And if you've got a 20-gallon tank and your gas has went up about now $2.50 a gallon from what it was last year, they're paying roughly $50 a week more for gas. And over a period of 52 weeks, that's about $2,500. So we took a $45,000 employee, 6%. That'll just about pay for their increase in gas that it costs them to get to work. So that's where we landed on the cost of living. Our 401k, we're going to recommend leaving it at 2%. That's 2% contribution to all employees for the 401k. Our pay study this year, and I'll explain a little bit about how the pay study works. Every year we take a third of the workforce and go in and reevaluate their pay grades. And we have pay grades for every position at the town. So minimum and a maximum and then a midpoint. And so we do developmental pay, which the way the developmental pay is designed is we give each employee an increase, the purpose being, or the point being, we want to get them from the minimum when they're hired in, from the minimum of that pay grade to the midpoint within 5 years. So we do a developmental pay every year, provided their evaluation is okay, to get them up to the midpoint. So it's what we do is every year we do a third of the workforce. That means this year it was a police department. They were done 3 years ago. They'll be done again in 2025. So we recommend, along with the developmental pay, we look at the pay structure and what those positions pay. And we may recommend moving the pay grade up. This year, we did recommend moving the pay grades up. So all of sworn positions in police department, if the budget's passed with the pay study in it, we'll move up 2 pay grades. And that basically will start our folks out at about $43,800. We've been doing this pay study, developmental pay, been doing it since 1998. It's worked out very well. And so we're recommending continuing that. It's what it saves is it saves us the trouble of getting too far behind in what we pay our folks. It keeps us right with the market. We try to stay somewhere between 98 and 103% of what the market pay is for a certain position. We do study some positions off cycle. We did some this year. But it also saves us the trouble of having to go in and do a large pay raise, a shift in pay grades and everything at one time. I was reading in the paper, I don't remember whether it was Guilford County or City of Greensboro. They're allocating almost $15 million, I think, this year to move some of their folks up into pay grade. So we've been doing it now for, I guess, right at 23 years, 24 years. And it saved us that problem. Winston-Salem had it probably 5 years ago. They had to appropriate about $6 million to get their folks up. I will tell you, the pay study this year with the PD, if it passes, like I said, they'll be readjusted. But I can tell you that particular department with those positions, they pay changes quickly. I mean, it's competitive. It's very difficult to hire folks. Difficult to hire folks in every department now. PD's extremely difficult. So everybody around us is changing the pay. This will put us back to be competitive with starting salaries, but it changes all the time. So, we just have to stay on top of it best we can. We see it in other positions throughout the year. That's why we do some of those positions off cycle, or we hire someone into a new position and we have to pay way more than what the minimum or maximum is. We'll go in and look at that position out of cycle. So that covers the pay study for this year. And in the budget message, I had some exhibits that kind of show where we are from an expense standpoint. Our salaries and wages are by far the biggest expense we have. They account for about right at 45% of our budget. So when you figure a $43 million budget, you're looking at about $20 million in salaries and wages just for that. When you combine that with insurance, insurance accounts for about 7%. So when you combine that with insurance, your salaries and wages and your insurance and benefits, you're over 50% of your budget. So our 3 largest departments, I think I mentioned them in the budget message, our 3 largest departments are public services, police department, fire department, in that order. And they account for about 74% of the budget. So when folks come in and say, hey, we need to cut the budget, okay, you want to cut people in which department? Our budget, I will tell you before I get into each department, our budget is primarily an operating budget. It's just a daily operating budget. We don't have a separate standalone capital project budget. So our capital projects get funneled into the operating budget best that we can. And by saying that, I mean that, not every year are we going to be able to do a big project. We were fortunate we got to do the renovations at Civitan Park last year. We also had the Parks and Rec Center in there. But it's been 25 years in the making to get the Parks and Rec Center in. About the same thing with Station 42, and about the same thing with the Public Services Building. Takes a lot longer to do it, but that's the only way we can do it with the tight budget that we have. So, when you take that in consideration, and almost 52% of our budget, salaries and wages and insurance, kind of doesn't leave a lot of money on the table. Our committed operations and maintenance, and this is Exhibit C in the budget message, but committed operations and maintenance account for about 15% of the budget. And by committed, I mean items such as telephone and postage, professional services, utilities, software fees, contracted services, equipment lease, all of those type items and all of those line items that you see in each department's budget that we really can't change. I mean, it's things that we have to do, that we have to have. We have contracts in place, things like that. So that's not going to change. And it usually accounts for somewhere between 14 and 16% of the budget. Last year it was about 16%. This year it's 15%, but it did go up a little bit dollar-wise, but it accounts for a little bit less of the budget. So you'll see that. You'll see those in every department throughout. Our uncommitted operations and maintenance is about 5%. And uncommitted is things like travel, training, departmental supplies. Each department has departmental supplies. It varies on how many, Parks and Rec's got 4 different line items. Fire's got 2 or 3, building maintenance, things like that. Those items are uncommitted only in the sense that we have some leeway in what we can set those expenses at. Doesn't mean that we don't have to do them. We still have to do building maintenance and fire. We still have to buy materials, landscape materials in Parks and Rec. So it's uncommitted only in the sense that we can change that line item some, but we still have to have the line item. Some of you, I know Joe and Chris have been on the board and remember when we cut those line items back, and I sat here and I said, we're cutting them back this year, but they'll be back. And all that happens, you postpone them 1 year, and the next year or 2 years down the road, they catch right back up in the budget. We've done the same thing with equipment. In fact, we're doing it this year with equipment a little bit. We're putting a lot of equipment off. The reason being was a 6% cost of living that's being recommended. All the department heads, myself, felt like it was much better to do the 6% cost of living than it was to buy equipment. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's like they said, if you don't have anybody to run the equipment does you no good. So we'll see it. We just don't see it this year. It will come back and catch up. So that's what happens with some of those uncommitted expenses. We can delay them, but they come right back. There's 2 main categories really of expenses that you'll see in each department's budget. Operating expenses and capital expenses. The operating expenses, as I said, are things just the daily operating expenses. They're mainly broken down into committed and uncommitted and into personnel. And then capital, of course, is equipment that we buy or the infrastructure projects that we do. So moving on, cover some of those operating expenses. I covered the cost of living, those type things, insurance. Our insurance this year, I'll cover that while I'm thinking about it. Our insurance this year is only going up about 2%, which is great because I remember years when it's went up. We were lucky if we got it at 9 or 10%. We changed, for those of you that are on the board that are new, Crystal recommended several years ago that we go with the NCHIP, which is basically an insurance pool of municipalities and counties in the state. We joined that, I think, 2 years ago, maybe 3, but it's 2 or 3. We joined that, and it has been great. It's a type of self-insurance, but you're in with a pool, so you've kind of got your costs spread out. But it has really saved us as far as increases. When you're only at 2%, that's great because when you figure you're almost at $2.5 to $3 million for your insurance, when it goes up 10%, you're looking at $300,000. So if you 2%, you're well below that. So we're glad that we made that move. Glad the board approved it when they did. Our insurance and bonds, they went up slightly. That's just based on kind of experience, some of the things throughout the year. So our other expense in the operating and maintenance is personnel. Personnel floats up and down. Last year we hired some new folks. The year before we didn't. This year we are recommending 4 new positions. 4 of those will be starting in January. We're recommending 3 new shift firefighters for the fire department and a GIS analyst in IT, all of those starting in January. The shift firefighters, if you saw in the fire department's budget, the overtime this year was about double what we anticipated it being. We anticipated it being about 240,000. It was about 460. So the 3 new firefighters will help offset that quite a bit. I will tell you, in the fire department, the way their shifts are structured, the way they work the shift, they have a 24-hour shift. If they work every shift that they're supposed to during the month, at the end of the month, they're going to have built-in overtime anyway. So there's no way around the built-in overtime. We have folks out, whatnot, so we budget about $240 every year. This year, we were down on manpower, we were down on personnel. The 3 shift firefighters became safety captains, and at the time we thought, hey, we can make this work. What happened was, with COVID, with workers' comp folks out, hurt on the job, Family Leave Act, things like that, we just had a lot of overtime. So we are recommending 3 shift firefighters to be added. Can't just add one because of the way the shifts are. Just add one, you've not done a whole lot. You've got 1 shift that's got 1 extra person, but then you got 2 that are down a person. GIS analysts, they will be based in IT, and they will do organization-wide GIS functions. The information they provide will be used by every department here at the town. The other position, it's not a new position. The position already exists in the fire rescue department. We're just going to change that position up, change the job functions up. Excuse me. So we're going to take one of the administrative positions and make it a fire and life safety educator. So that position's there. If the board approves the budget, that new person will start in July as opposed to January. So our capital projects that we're recommending, we've really got one. We've got more than one, but some of them are smaller. But the biggest one, I think I heard everybody on the board when it came up talk about the need to do some resurfacing of some town roads. We are doing some resurfacing using money that we have over at CCUC on the roads that CCUC has torn up, which is quickly becoming every road in Kernersville. But for those roads that aren't torn up, we're recommending $1.5 million in resurfacing. I think the gentleman came in maybe February and gave a presentation about the pavement condition rating. So it's what we do if the board approves it, is that $1.5 million goes toward resurfacing, and we will do the roads that were identified as being the ones that were the most critical in need. If the road has already completely failed and it's going to take more than resurfacing, we probably won't do that because that's a much bigger job. It just depends on the road, the traffic, the use of it, and all of that. But we are recommending $1.5 million. In that, we've got some other small capital infrastructure projects, such as some security alarms and video conferencing and whatnot, station alerting, things like that in the fire rescue department. They're in about the $40,000 range, but this one's $1.5 million. Other equipment that's being recommended, 25 computers. We're recommending replacing 25 computers. We recommend some computer replacements about every year for the employees. That keeps them on a cycle where all of our computers are pretty fresh and up to date, have the latest software operating system on it, and everything else. Also, 10 network switches. What the network switches do is they basically run the whole network here at the town. If those switches go bad, then the network fails. So to keep that from happening, we have to replace those. We replaced, I think, 5 or 6 last year. So we'll look at them again this year and replace some more of those. And also a Wi-Fi upgrade. It's been a while since we've done that. You all may notice it with some of the speeds in various parts of Town Hall are slower than in other parts. So we're going to upgrade that Wi-Fi in different areas of Town Hall. The other equipment that we're recommending in PD, we're recommending a replacement of 5 patrol vehicles, actually 4 patrol vehicles and 1 SRO vehicle. The SRO vehicle is per our contract with the school system. And then the 4 patrol vehicles. We rotate those vehicles out. I will tell you that we've got about 75 cars in that fleet. So if we replace 5 a year, it kind of gives you an idea of how long a car is in service before it's replaced. Somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Don't know about you all, but if I call 911 and I want the police to come, I don't really want the car to break down when they leave coming to my house. So we try to keep them up, get them out of there before that happens. You know, can't guarantee that the new one won't break down. We've had that happen as well, but usually by the time they go out, they're somewhere between 12 and 15 years old and have somewhere between 120 and 180,000 miles on them. And we sell most of those on Gov Deals. They buy them, paint them up, put some nice wheels on them, then it becomes a buy here, pay here car, and they finance it. So some of them don't always make it to their destination. We had a few one year that broke down on the way to whoever purchased them, taking them to his lot. They broke down, didn't make it. So, you know, that's the way they go sometimes. So that's all in PD. We usually try to do about 7 or 8. But again, this year with the cost of living, we cut that down to 5. Parks and Recreation, they have currently really one staff vehicle. They have a Dodge Durango for all of the admin staff, and it gets used all the time. So they requested another one for the last several years. It has been cut out in favor of other equipment to use on the parks and whatnot. So this year we're recommending purchasing that vehicle for Parks and Rec. In the fire department, the staff vehicle and fire department replace one. It'll either be the bat chief vehicle or one of the safety captain's vehicle. We're also recommending replacing 16 radios this year. This will be a 3-year process. We'll replace 16 every year for the next 3 years. And so we do that. We start it. We replace them. They have a life expectancy of, you know, depending on the whims of Motorola, sometime around 7 years. So by the time we get all 50 radios roughly replaced, we've got a couple years before we start back over in that. And as I mentioned, it's a fire alerting system for Station 41, and then a security system for Station 41 and 43, similar to what we have at the other 2 stations and similar to what we have here at Town Hall, Parks and Rec, and everything else. Public services, we're recommending a new rear load truck. That was actually approved in fiscal year 21-22, but it will not come in and be delivered until we think July of 22-23. So it's in the budget for 22-23. If it comes in before that, we'll pay for it in this fiscal year and take it out of the budget next year. And then in stormwater, they're getting a new knuckle boom truck. Y'all may not be familiar with, you've seen it, I'm sure, but you may not be familiar with which truck it is. It's the truck that has the big claw on the back of it, so to speak. It'll rotate out, reach down, grab brush, and pick it up. We're recommending that in stormwater. That is an allowed expense for stormwater. Stormwater is an enterprise fund, meaning it generates its own revenue. You see a stormwater fee on your tax bill every year. That goes into the stormwater enterprise fund as revenue, and then the expenses that come out of that fund have to be used only for stormwater purposes. So the expenses and the revenue offset one another. There are some projects being done this year in stormwater, but the piece of equipment that we're purchasing will be the knuckle boom truck. So that gets through all of the general expenses for every department, or general, not for every department, but general expenses. I'll go through each department and highlight the expenses in those. Starting with you all, governing body, you'll see that the fees paid to elected officials increased a little bit for this upcoming fiscal year. This will be the first full year that we have the increases in effect for the mayor and board of aldermen that was approved by the previous board. Previous board approved an increase for the elected officials. I think the mayors went into effect a little earlier than the board members, so they will all now be in at that approved rate in fiscal year 22-23. We do have one reduction under operating and maintenance, and that is in legal expense. It was $166,000 last year. As you all remember, we had former town attorney John Wolf and Mr. Powell both. At that point, Mr. Wolf has since retired, so now we have Mr. Powell's salary. We did put some more in there for outside services that we may need, you know, to do title search and whatnot on property, things like that. We've had some of that come up this year, so we've added a little bit to cover that. The only other real changes were in the special appropriations, and this is the mainly the nonprofits that the board funds. Some of them this year requested a small increase. You know, I think the Kernersville Theater requested $800 more. Shepherd Center went up, they requested $1,000 more, and Next Step requested, I think, about $2,500 or $2,800. So those are reflected in there. And also the Kernersville Auto Museum requested $10,000. That is in there this year as well. So that is really the only changes in the nonprofits. Salvation Army and Crisis Control, Kernersville Historic Preservation Society. I don't think any of those three made a presentation along with community appearance, but they're in the budget. They don't make presentations usually because there's you know, they haven't been in the budget. CAC is basically a town committee, and the Historic Preservation Society is kind of the same as the CAC, but they do have their own board and everything else. So they didn't make presentations, but they are in the budget, as well as PART. Our contribution to PART is for the route that runs down to the VA and to the hospital. They added that route probably 4 years ago and asked that the town contribute to the cost of running that route. So we do run that route, make a contribution to that. The administration department, I did not note any significant increases in that department. Contracted services went up slightly. That's the services that we use in preparing the code of ordinances, things like that, and insurance and bonds. Insurance and bonds, you'll see, went up in every department slightly, and that's based on the budget of the department, experience in the department, things like that. So it went up a little bit in about every department. Nothing else really in the administration department. In community development has 3 divisions. They have planning, permit and enforcement, and then drawing a blank.
Engineering.
Yeah, engineering doesn't have a whole lot in it as far as staff, but they are one of their 3. Nothing much changed in permit and enforcement division. The biggest change there is under salaries and wages, our temporary part-time. We have a part-time building inspector here. This year we budgeted $30,400. Next year we're recommending $51,000. Reason being is because of the certifications that individual has. He will be working more as well. We have, you know, we've had a lot of development approved and a lot started, so he will be working more than he has in the past. If we don't do that, as I've told boards in the past, the option is not to do it, and then you all will start getting calls from developers about not being able to get their projects inspected. So it's kind of a catch-22. We have the folks out to do the inspections. We get them through. We pay a little bit to have that done, or we don't, and they sit and wait. And I think probably the best option is to go ahead and pay and have them done, because as you see, we do generate quite a bit of revenue from building inspections through the years. Next division in there is planning. Not a whole lot of change in any line item in planning. Employee training going up a little bit. We've had some new employees start in that department that have to go through some training, so it's going up about $1,500. And professional services is going up slightly. Under professional services are things like surveying, appraisals, engineering. We also do some marketing research, some data research, have some numbers put together. When we have folks call in interested in a site or interested in looking at an area for economic development, that gives us the data to do that. We use some outside companies to generate that. It is been very beneficial in the past for us to have that information, give that to folks. We use some of that data with the North Point development that just got approved down on Macy Grove. So it's good information to have, and we generate it and use that for development. Engineering, as you can see, there's some columns in there that are zeros that weren't zeros last year. Again, that's the projects that were approved. Some of them were done last year, some of them haven't been done. And again, when they come back, if they come back this year, if they're not in the budget, we'll do a budget amendment, add them to the budget, and then you'll see them reflected in next year's budget under the estimated 22-23. Finance department, employee training, up a little bit. That's for the new grants employee that has been approved that will be starting next week, I think. They will need some training for that position. And about every department, I think every department here does have training allocated. And most of that training, if not all of it, is to keep some type of professional certification. In my department, Keith and Beth, they go for professional certifications for their clerk's certification. Catherine's department has the same thing for planning, HR. So all departments, finance, the certified budget officer, certified purchasing agent. So all departments have some type of training that they're required to do, certifications they're required to keep up. So, the training fluctuates with those certifications, which ones have been obtained, which ones need renewing, things like that. It fluctuates along with those. Professional services in finance has increased a little bit. That is our auditing contract. The company comes in, does our auditing and financial statements. It's primarily, that's what that is. Contracted services, you'll see, went up. That's a good thing because that's what we pay the county to collect our property tax. So if it's going up, that means we're collecting more property tax. So when you see that number start going the other way, that's when we've got to worry about something. So it went up. Banking services, we bank with PNC. I think it's tonight you'll see a contract in there to renew those banking services. It's the standard services we pay for, whether it be debit and credit cards, monthly checks, things like that. It's the monthly services that we pay PNC for that service. Nothing else really in finance. IT. Yeah. Hold on a minute. It's estimated to be 49,340, and I don't think it went up that much. Let me see what else is in there, JR. Hold on, there's probably something else in it. Let me see. Over last year, we added the merchant fees went up a little bit, and then there's an open edge that I don't think was in the budget last year. And I don't know, what is open edge, Franz? Do you remember? It's what? Yeah, it's Parks and Rec fees that we collect through online services there, and it went up as well because this will be one of the first years back from COVID where we have people doing online registration. So all of that's in banking services as well. So as that increases, then the part of that's our 2 or 3% increases. The PNC services runs about 24, looks like about 40,000 of that 74. So it's what we had was, we probably moved it from another department over into finance this year as well. So IT, professional services in there, added this year. That will be some positions that the new GIS analyst will utilize, some services they'll utilize for that position. The telephone and postage, it's a little bit misleading because of what it says. That's the internet and phone system basically for all the departments. It's not just telephone and postage for that, but it's what our voice over IP is, all the expenses for that, for the whole town, not just for IT. And then the equipment lease expense, that is the lease on all copiers in each department. It used to be in each department. We've consolidated that into the IT department. So if, you know, you go through and see where we took it out of each department, put it into IT. The reason we did that is because IT basically handles all that. They handle the putting out the contracts for the bid on the copiers, something breaks, you know, all of that. So we put all of that over into IT this year. And there's nothing else really in there other than the equipment that I recommended to be purchased for that. HR, the biggest thing that'll jump out at you in HR is the wellness center. You'll see it down there on a line item by itself, $250,000. Last year, not last year, but this year, 21-22, that expense was in the insurance line item. So it was up in the group insurance expense line item. We took it in every department. So we took it out of that line item and put it all into one line item in HR, because HR basically is the one that's responsible for the wellness center. So we took everything and put it in that one line item, where that way all the expenses that come in that are for the wellness center, it's easier to just send all of them to that one line item rather than having the different departments kind of sort through that. And then the advertising, as I said earlier, is getting tougher and tougher to hire new folks. So we've allocated $4,000 this year to do some enhanced recruiting, going out to different job fairs. We've already started that in this current year. We're going out to more job fairs, going out on site to some community colleges, even to high schools, whatnot, talking to folks about different careers with the town. To do that, and obviously it takes money and time to do that. So we're recommending allocating a small amount this year. We think it will definitely pay back in the fact that we can get some good employees from that.
Curtis, let me ask, where the wellness center line item you were talking about in HR, where is it?
It's down in the operating and maintenance, about 1, 2, 3, 5 up from the bottom on the front page of the HR. Got it. Yeah, it's 250 this year. Last year it was 0. And last year also, if I remember correctly, it was only a half a year, correct? Yeah. So do what? 110 last year. It was a half a year. We started it in January. As you all have received the invitation and notice, we'll be doing the grand opening of that the 7th. So, but it was all last year again. It was all in a different line item. We just consolidated. Yes, sir. Station 41. So PD, PD is probably the first department that has a lot of line items in it. Under personnel and professional, employee training line item went up about 30,000. The reason that went up is because we've got to get caught up on some training that was put off because of COVID. We just didn't do as much. A lot of reasons. The biggest of those, they weren't doing much training. What they were doing, some of it was virtual, but a lot of it they just didn't do. So a lot of our folks were not able to go to that training. So we've been catching up a little bit the last 2 years, and they really didn't even start much of it back in July of last year when this budget went into effect. So this is really the first year since COVID that we're seeing the opportunity to go back to full training. Telephone and postage, we've got a couple new services for the guys regarding some of the phones and services they use there. Printing, that went up a little bit. They print some different materials throughout the year, some recruitment materials, things like that. So that went up. Maintenance and repair building, all that is really just catching up on some maintenance that we've not done to the downstairs of the PD through the years. So we've added some in to do that. Maintenance and repair radio, that's not really a maintenance and repair of a radio. That is our contract with Motorola. We negotiated a contract with them. Is what it is it is for our radios. That's our radio system that the PD uses. They come in and keep our radios current and up to date and replace them at no charge. When each one of them breaks individually, they tell you it's at no charge, but that $243,000 covers that. Not much of an option if you want radios. They're all about the same, whether it's Motorola or Axon or whoever. They're all about the same. This one was what, 6 years? 10 years. So it was a 10-year. They give you when we went into it, if you can sign it for 10 years, you get a reduction of about, was it $25,000 a year? $25,000 a year. If you didn't do the 10 years, it was $25,000 a year more for like the first 4 or 5 years, and then it jumped up even more beyond that. The premise behind it is that really the radio system is they only really if we didn't have this and we went out and bought the radios and said, we'll just go until they wear out. It's about a 7-year life, 5 to 7 years before they don't service that type radio anymore. So with this contract, it's what it is it keeps us current on the radios. What did we do? 3 years ago? When did we enter it? 3 years ago? So we've got about 6 or 7 years left. Now, we didn't have, before we had this, we just had a standard contract on the radios. And when they broke or deleted or became obsolete or whatever, we would replace them. And the last time we did that, it was what, $1.5 million? Yeah, a little over $2 million. So really, it's one of those things. They know about what it's going to cost you, and you'll see it again in another line item. They just go ahead and price it out for you for about 10 years and say it's what you'll pay. So it worked. It works out well. We have the radios, and we don't have to do a big chunk all at once. Our contracted services software, which is on page 2. Under operating and maintenance, you see that increased to $260,000. That is software, but it's what it is. That is our body cams and our tasers, and it is to store that on the cloud. We currently store that on servers here at the town, but we're to the point to where we have to replace our body cameras and our tasers. The company that we're going to, is it Axon or Axios? Axon. They said, we'll give you the body cameras and the tasers, but you use our service to store it on the cloud. So again, they know how much the body cameras and the tasers cost. And they say, hey, we basically, they prorated it for us as to what we'd be paying in payments. So $260,000, that gets us body cameras, tasers, and stores on the cloud. I can tell you that storing it on our servers here, we're able to do it, but as we get more and more of that body cam footage, it's becoming more and more of a problem to have the capacity to store it. And I think that's about it for the PD, other than the cars. Fire department, I mentioned a couple of them already. The 3 new employees you'll see reflected in the salaries and wages for that department. The overtime, you'll see in there, the initial request was 468. That came down to 240 when we got the 3 new employees. And then employee training up a little bit from what was approved in 21-22. Again, those folks are able to go do some more training. And so we are now sending them to do that training. We are fortunate that we've got a training center here. We can do a lot of that training here, but our guys have to go off site to do a lot of training, have to send them there. It's just like anything else. I mean, you pay for them to go, pay for the training also. Departmental utilities expense, we're taking on Beeson's station. We're looking to get in that station soon, even without a new building there. So that includes that expense. Travel, that goes along with the training. When you see your training go up, travel goes up a little bit with it. Maintenance and repair of fire trucks. We've got to, and we do this every few years. We've got to do some repairs to the pumps and the valves on some of those trucks. We don't do those every year, so that expense fluctuates a little bit. Departmental supplies and materials. We're getting some new equipment in that department, or in departmental supplies. I think one of them is Lunar's for on-scene firefighter location tracking. Tracks firefighters when they're in the building. Something happens, gives us a better idea of where those folks are at. And also, you've got the justifications in your budget. You can see all the other items that are in there in departmental supplies as well. And then the turnout gear, we'll have to get gear for the new employees if approved. And it's also some replacement gear. We have 2 sets of gear, turnout gear for every firefighter, because if they go onto an active fire, they go in that fire, they have to take that gear when they get it back, have to let it dry out, have to wash it. They need another set in case they have another fire come in after that. So we have 2 sets of gear for everybody. And then the miscellaneous expense, it jumped up a lot this year. Not a lot, but I mean, it went from $2,000 to $10,000. That is for the celebration, the 100th anniversary celebration of the fire department. As you all are aware, we're getting the antique truck renovated and remodeled in time for that. So we'll have that also. And then the other expenses in there, as I mentioned earlier, the station alerting. So what that does is it ties all the stations in together. They know where each station is out on a call, tells them things such as the weather, other things going on in and around the area, things like that. We're recommending that for some of the stations. I think it's station 43. Is that right, Chief? 41. And then the video conferencing services is what that is, to tie all the stations in together so that one station won't necessarily have to leave to go to another one just for a meeting or for a conference. So those are also in there in capital, along with the portable radios that we recommended replacing. Public services admin, I don't think there's anything in there that changed. And overall, I think that budget was one that actually went down a little bit. In installment purchase, they had an item drop off, and I should have explained that to start with. I didn't cover the installment purchase, but on a lot of these things like cars and paving, we'll finance that just like you would if you go out and buy a car. You finance it 5 years or whatever. We do that as well, and you'll see under one of the pages in each department, it has a sheet that says installment purchases, and it tells what every purchase is that we currently have financed and the new ones that are being recommended. It shows you how many years that's for, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And it shows you the number or the year that we're on, to say 3 of 5 annual payments or 5 of 7 or whatever. So about every department has some type of installment purchase item still in its budget. In public services admin, they got some furniture and appliances that went in the new building. This is our final payment in 22-23. So that's why, after that, it'll come down. Or it will come down this year compared to 21-22. Street division, no real changes in the street division. Their departmental supplies and materials went up about $4,900. They're buying a new plate the shell on the road, the road plate, compactor to put those back down. And then $1.5 million that's been recommended for resurfacing. And you'll see that under installment purchases. I think it's third sheet of the budget is capital outlay detailed. Paving improvements, one of 10 annual payments, is $193,000 a year. So been asked before, why don't we just pay cash and pay for it, not finance it? The main reason is you can get more if you finance it. Obviously, if we went in, we had $1.5 million this year in new money, basically from taxes. All we'd have been able to do if we didn't finance anything is the paving. We wouldn't have been able to do anything else. So with installment purchase, we put $200,000 of it toward that payment, and that gives us another $1.3 million to do other things with. So some things we will pay for, but a lot of your bigger expenses, we do an installment purchase on that. And it varies how long you can do it. If it's a capital improvement, most of the time they'll let you do 10 years. If it's equipment, most of the time it's 5 years. You know, so you might look in here at something and it's like, why are we doing that 10 years when it's only $30,000? It's just the way we structure our loans. It's capital, so we don't want to pay $1,200 to send something down to the LGC that's capital and only finance it 5 years. We'll just put it in with the package of stuff that's going for 10 years and just send it on. So they allow you to do, or they require you really to do different terms depending on what it is. So you'll see that there for paving improvements, and you can see all the way up. They've got about 7 or 8 items in that department. 2 of them would be paid off. 3 of them actually would be paid off in 22, 23, so they won't be in the budget. And it basically is what we do is we see what's coming up to be paid off. That's when we'll replace it with something else. Solid waste, not a tremendous amount in solid waste. You know, professional services, it just went up because of the services that we use. They had an increase in what their cost of labor is to us. Departmental supplies and materials and departmental supplies and materials for recycling. Both of those came down primarily because we're buying less recycling cans and less rollout cans. We buy new garbage cans and new recycling cans every year. Some years we buy more than others. When we buy more, it's obviously a little bit more. When we buy less, it's a little bit less. Landfill tipping fees, you see that has came down a little bit. That's because we're phasing out our commercial garbage collection. So we're taking less solid waste to the landfill. So you see the revenue declines, but also along with that, the expenses are declining. And then contracted services software, we're recommending a new software to be used in that department. It's a routeware software that will allow us to monitor our routes and see where the trucks are. Also recommend improvements to service that route faster. And it's a monthly fee on that. And again, the only purchase in that department is the rear load truck. Central maintenance, you know, this is the one that I can tell you that we're probably not going to be on the money on 3 line items, and I'll probably come back before the year's over with and say, hey, we might need a budget amendment. If we don't, we'll be lucky. That's because this department includes gas, diesel, and oil and lubricant. Who knows what it's going to cost before the end of the year. But we've budgeted about $213,000 for diesel, $213,000 for gas, and in oil and lubricant, about $24,000. It can't go up or down a whole lot, but your gas and diesel, you know, we put it in there. As you can see, we increased both of those almost $50,000 from what we approved in 21-22. I dropped it a little bit. I talked to Dorn when he did his budget, the price was a little bit higher. When I came back in and did mine, it was a little bit lower. I don't know, but we think we'll be close. If nothing else, maybe we got enough to last the first 6 months. Who knows? I mean, if it hits $6 a gallon by, you know, July the 4th, I can't tell you. But other than that, there's nothing really in central maintenance. General services is the department that basically does the services to all town buildings. They're responsible for this building,
buildings over here that we rent out, public services, Parks and Rec, those type buildings, are old library building. They do the service at those buildings. Not a lot of change in any of that, any of their budget. Departmental supplies and materials went up just a little bit, mainly because of the cost of supplies. Types of supplies they use went up a little bit, and that's really the only change. In that building, the board did approve a new employee for that department last year, so that's good. He's been working out well. And the last department that is included in the general budget, or the general fund budget, is Parks and Recreation. Professional services, you'll see there's about a $20,000 increase in that department, or in that line item. Three things that are in there this year that we're going to have to do that we've not done too much of. We've got some electrical work that needs to be done on some different areas, some plumbing work. We need to do some plumbing on some parks and replumb some things. And then some tree removal. We know that coming up, there's some trees that we're going to have to remove, so they are in the budget. Maintenance and repair buildings, it went up $10,000. One item in there did that, and that's to add a bathroom down at the maintenance building. We currently only have one bathroom at the maintenance building. We need two, so that is to add that new bathroom. Maintenance and repair parks. The skate park needs some work, and Harmon Park also has some items that we need to do into that were not in the budget for 21-22. Maintenance and repair ball fields. We've got a couple of the ball fields, softball fields, that we need to do a little bit of minor work to, soccer fields, and just the general cost of supplies for that. We use a lot of fertilizer, a lot of lime, things like that. As you all know, buying it for your yard, all of that has went up. And so we use a lot of it. And when it goes up, we use clay for the ball fields, use sand rock for the cross-country course. Every bit of that's going up. In some cases, it's doubled from what it was in 21-22. So for buying the same thing, the price of it basically just went up if we buy the same amount. Departmental supplies and materials, same deal. We use a lot of janitorial supplies, as you can imagine, with the parks, bathrooms at the parks, cleaning those, cleaning everything at the ball fields. We need some more supplies, and the cost of it went up. We cut it back some last year. This year we got to catch up a little bit as well. Athletic expense, we've added a new programming. We've taken on some new programming. That increased a little bit, but it's just generally the cost associated with that, with providing those programs, that has went up. And contracted services, mainly that is an increased cost for cleaning porta-johns, things like that. Mainly the porta-johns. Starting to see a lot of use. We were cleaning them, I think, about once a week out at Ivy. We've got 13 of them, and we're now cleaning them probably twice a week. No way around it. As we get more activity out there, we have to clean the porta-johns more often. Good thing is we get more activity, so we're generating more revenue. And the last fund, I won't cover the forfeiture funds. Those are just funds in the police department. You got some federal justice, things like that, state and local. They have a revenue, they have an expense that comes in with them. Got a 911 fund, same way. The next one's the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. As I mentioned earlier, this is an enterprise fund. Everything that comes in goes out. Buying the knuckle boom truck, and we are recommending, you'll see in the expense sheet, we are recommending another capital project, which is the Beeson Creek project. So that's in the budget for $605,000 as well. And the last one that I will cover is the occupancy tax fund. The occupancy tax is, and you see it on the goals and objective page, but that is revenue generated from individuals that come and stay in the hotels in Kernersville. And so every time that we have someone come in and stay at a hotel, they pay an occupancy tax, and we get a portion of that. And it's specific how that has to be used. It has to be used for activities that generate tourism. And so we recommend giving that money, and the board has in previous years, as you see there, to the Chamber of Commerce, Kerner's Folly, the Botanical Gardens, and the Kernersville Little League, just a small portion of that for the regional tournament that they host. When we have money left from that fund, which we haven't had the last couple of years, when COVID came, I can tell you, occupancy tax fund got wiped out. Nobody was traveling, nobody staying in the hotels, nothing. So when we have some extra in there, we transfer it to Parks and Recreation, because Parks and Recreation is the largest generator of tourism in Kernersville. And that is with the softball tournaments, baseball tournaments, soccer tournaments, and cross-country events. So they generate more tourism. At one time, and they may still be, it generated more tourism than anything in Forsyth County. Can't tell you whether that's still true, but at one time it did. So that's all I've got. And actually, I made it 5 minutes early. So be glad to answer any questions. If you don't have any questions tonight, if you thought of something while I was going through it, you want to think about it, and then ask me, feel free to email me, call me, come by, whatever, however you'd like to do it. The next step in this process, we will have a public hearing next Tuesday night. My presentation at the public hearing used to kind of duplicate this. It wasn't quite this long, but it kind of duplicated it. It will be significantly shorter. I will probably just say, hey, here's the tax rate that we're recommending. Here's the purchases. Here's the new personnel. And here's the total budget. I might cover the tax rate of surrounding municipalities. I will tell you, I'll touch briefly on that. It's in my budget message. There's a chart that shows the tax rate of surrounding municipalities that are full service municipalities, meaning they provide all of the same services we do. Kernersville is currently lower than any of those, and I anticipate we will remain lower. I know Greensboro is recommending leaving their tax rate right at 66 cents, despite being a revaluation year, and they could probably lower it about 10 cents. They're recommending leaving it where it's at. Winston-Salem was recommending a 2.3 cent tax increase, I think, and Forsyth County is recommending leaving theirs where it's at. Don't know about the rest of those that's in that chart, but we will very likely have the lowest tax rate of the folks around us. So I'll present that at that public hearing, and then if everything goes well, by law, we have to adopt a budget by July 1 or do an interim budget. I can tell you don't really want to do an interim budget. So we will have this on the agenda probably, I don't know, I think the 25th. Is that when our meeting is?
The next meetings will be the 22nd and 28th.
So we'll
So
have
it
it
could go on either one.
probably on 22nd or 28th for approval by the board. Again, if you've got any questions, you can ask them tonight, most definitely, or you can just get with me and let me know. And if it looks like there might be more than one budget to be considered, I will tell you it's not as simple as saying, hey, I want to pass a budget at a 58 cent tax rate. We have to have a budget ordinance with that rate for the board to adopt. So if it looks like it may be multiple budgets, tax rates to consider, I'll need to know that in advance so that we can prepare those ordinances. So that's all I've got. Went through it fairly quickly, but I met with about all of you regarding the budget. Again, there's not a tremendous amount in it because of the cost of living increase. We cut back on all equipment and everything like that. So be glad to answer any questions you have, or again, feel free to contact me with any.
Curtis, you've done a good job compiling a lot of important information for the town together to set forward the policies and the goals and objectives of the entire town for the coming year. So I did have a very small question about the nonprofit presentations that we heard this year. Okay. And so many of them are funded in special appropriations under governing body. But this one I thought may also be in one of the sub-items in Parks and Rec. I think that Kernersville Little League did a request to us to help with a tournament they were having, hosting the umpires and providing food for the statewide tournament they were having.
Yes,
Is there an appropriation for that?
They're in the occupancy tax.
Okay,
Yeah, $3,000.
okay,
And I think that's what they requested this year. They did not request any money in 21. Actually, they did request it in 21, 22, but they did not actually send in a request to us because they didn't host a tournament.
okay.
But they are in there. There was one, and I meant to mention it. There is one organization that has been funded by the Board of Aldermen for, I don't know, 15 years that did not request any funding this year, and that's Kernersville Cares for Kids, primarily because right now they're trying to get everything restructured and reorganized. They received their funding for 21, 22, and with them going through kind of the reorganization, they didn't spend anything out in 21, 22. COVID really took a toll on Kernersville Cares for Kids. That and new turnover at the school with principals and teachers that were the coaches leaving and things like that. So they're in the process of reorganizing, and they did not feel it right to request any money in 22, 23 since they still had money from 21, 22 that they have not spent.
Does that carry over to them? Or, I mean, you've already distributed it to them then?
Yes, ma'am. They
Okay.
have already requested from the town and received their funding for 21, 22. And my anticipation is once they get reorganized and everything back going, that they'll request money in the 23, 24 budget.
Well, appreciate you clarifying those points. And again, you and the department heads and the staff that worked with the department heads and Franz and our town finance department have worked together well for an excellent draft budget for this board to consider. We do appreciate all of your efforts. Does anyone else have questions about the budget at this time? I see Chris shaking his head no. Mr. Barrow? Mr. Apple?
I do, but I think it'd be more appropriately posed next time and also give Curtis give me a time to address those with him by
Okay.
email for next
Okay.
time.
Mr. Gorham? Mr. Penix? Okay, we are going to have a second meeting. It's scheduled to start at 6:30, but I think given that we've been meeting since shortly after 5 o'clock, we should take a brief recess. So do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Got a motion by Chris Thompson, second by J.R. Gorham. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. This meeting is adjourned, but we will reconvene and start another meeting shortly. Thank you. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Kernersville Board of Aldermen. Today is June 1st. We started a few minutes late because we had a budget workshop immediately prior to this meeting, but we're glad you're joining us now. Tonight we'll start with an invocation. Chaplain Lansley was not able to be here and attend this evening, so it'll be led by Alderman J.R. Gorham.
If you would pray according to your faith and traditions, as I pray according to mine, shall we bow? Dear Lord, we come to you today with thanksgiving on our hearts. Thank you for this day that you have made and being glad in it. We thank you for all who have assembled here today for this Board of Aldermen meeting. We ask for your holy guidance and your infinite wisdom as we go forth to conduct the business of the town of Kernersville, so that everything that will take place here this evening will be done decently and in order. Lord, we thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us individually and as a community and a town. And at this time, Lord, we would just like to just pause just for a moment to ask that you will be with the families in Buffalo, New York, and the families of the 19 children and 2 teachers killed at the elementary school in Texas. But it is only by your mercy and your grace that we here in Kernersville have yet to experience an incident so tragic. Continue to be with us here in Kernersville. Continue to wrap your arm of protection around us. We thank you for what you have done for us. We thank you for what you're doing for us right now. And we thank you for those things yet to manifest in our lives. And for that, dear Lord, we give your name all the praise, all the honor, and all the glory. And everyone that agrees with that prayer, say amen.
Thank you, Alderman Gorham. Will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance. You may be seated. All right, so 1A is speakers from the floor, and I have Rick Dappin signed up to speak on community development.
I'm Rick Dappin. I live at 208 Holly Tree Drive here in Kernersville. And I wanted to speak tonight and say that a big accolade needs to be given to community development. The last 3 or 4 times that there have been zoning maps in the newspaper, you could read them, and they were really great. And I really think everybody should take notice of that because it's been pretty bad for about 4 months. And another item I'd like to bring up is in regards to community development, when K798 was a case both before the planning board and this Board of Aldermen. And in association with that, there was KDP 58. And in the presentation to the planning board, Cameron made the comment, and in the presentation to this Board of Aldermen meeting, Catherine made the comment that our land use plan south of Salem Parkway is way out of date. And I sent an email to a bunch of y'all to say, hey, maybe somebody needs to update that, because about 7 years ago, we did the western section of the town and updated it. And about 4 years ago, we did the northern section of the town. So maybe it's time to do the southern part of the town. And I guess the Board of Aldermen are the only ones that can make that happen, assign that as a duty to the staff. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Dappin. Okay, item 1B is consideration of proposals for multi-year financial auditing services. Mr. Swisher?
Madam Mayor and Board, as the memo says, financial auditing services for the town for fiscal year 21-22 all the way through fiscal year 25-26. We put it out to 4 companies: Smith Leonard, Dixon Hughes, Goodman, Williams, Overman, and Pierce, and Mildred Sue. We got 1 proposal back, and that was from Dixon Hughes, Goodman. And so we're recommending that we award the financial auditing services for the town to Dixon Hughes, Goodman. You will see that even though this is a 5-year contract, the board also has to approve it annually at the rate that's quoted in that 5-year contract, especially now with the requirements receiving ARPA money. So this will be the financial auditing services for those fiscal years, and the next item on the budget is for the fiscal year 22-23.
Okay, are there any questions, or do I have a motion? I've got a motion to approve by Alderman Chris Thompson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Gorham. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Item C, consideration of a contract for financial auditing services for fiscal year ending June 30, 2022.
Yeah, it's actually for 21-22, not 22-23, but it's for the contract with Dixon Hughes Goodman in the amount of $66,200. Dixon Hughes, for those of you that are new on the board, they have been our auditor now for several years. They provided great service to us. Some folks have asked you to change up, have a different auditor every year. Basically, we do. It's the same company, but it's different auditors. They send in someone different every year. Primarily, they're here twice a year, and they come in and have a different team just about every year. Maybe one person on the team is the same, and they go through. They're here usually for about 3 weeks each time. Go through all of our invoices, things like that. They have certain things that they specifically monitor and audit, and then they just randomly pull departments and pull invoices for each each line item and each expense. So we've been pleased with them. They made good recommendations through the years to the town in some areas where we can improve our controls, so forth. And we put those recommendations into place, and we, we've had a good working relationship with them in that aspect as well.
If you could repeat what you said about the dates?
This is for fiscal year 21-22. I said earlier that the next item was for 22-23, but it's actually for 21-22. It's for this fiscal year end.
Okay, so it's printed correctly on the agenda?
Yes, ma'am, it is
Okay.
correct. I just misspoke.
I was looking at the contract right here, so
Yeah.
it looks like it's for the audit of the statements ending in 2022, with the work beginning in June 2022.
Say that again?
We will audit the financial statements of the government activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information, including the related notes to the financial statements, which collectively comprise the basic financial statements of the town as of and for year ending June 30th, 2022.
Correct. It'll be for fiscal year 21-22, which ends June 30th of 2022.
But it's confusing because the next paragraph says we'll begin this in June 2022.
Yeah, they'll start at June 1, if not a little bit earlier. And then it'll go beyond June. If they get here in June, I'll be surprised, but it usually stretches out into about August or September. Sometimes, just depending. Sometimes they're out of here by, late July. It really just kind of depends on when they come in.
Okay, any further questions, or do I have a motion to approve? Got a motion by Alderman Thompson, second by Alderman Apple. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, item D.
Item D is an agreement with consideration of utility agreement with North Point Development. North Point Development is the company doing the business park off Mesa Grove Road. This agreement is very similar to the one that we entered with Trav Business Park, or TDO at the time, several years ago. And that is the area where we now have FedEx and Amazon. And we also have entered a similar agreement with Deer Hitachi when it was Deer Hitachi. We've also done one with LaMille Flowers. And it's what this is the town agrees to go in and contribute to a portion of their water and sewer extension. As long as they are basically expanding the public infrastructure, the town has agreed in past to help contribute toward that. So you have the agreement in there. The total estimated cost of infrastructure for the entire project is $6 million. And that's about what it was for TDO. TDO, we gave almost, I think, close to $3 million or $2.5 million in reimbursements. Reimbursement for this project is $710,985. And that is a portion of the water and sewer extension needed. And it's what that does is it extends that water and sewer and opens up area to the east for future development. This money will not come from the town's general fund. This will come from our water sewer fund over at City County Utilities. That's one of the reasons we can use that fund. That's one of the allowed expenditures from that fund. As I've said, we've done this several times in the past, and with the exception of Deer Hitachi, it has been for water and sewer extension. Without this type of agreement, I can tell you that we would not have FedEx in Kernersville, and we would not have Amazon, because there would not be water and sewer in that area. So costs you a little bit, but you're getting $6 million infrastructure, and the $710,000 you will get back in tax revenue probably the first year. So be glad to answer any questions. I can answer any. Ms. Garner can answer any as well related to the investment or the agreement itself.
Are there any questions?
I got a question. Did they go ahead and did we agree to give them this money before they went out there and graded all that land and bought it and had it all subdivided?
we had entered discussions with them, but of course the board had not approved anything, so nothing was agreed on that.
So if we don't give them this money, they're still gonna do what they're supposed to do, right?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay, well then why are we giving them that money? I mean, it's just.
Because they had
It's
asked
a common
before.
sense question.
Yeah, they had asked, and we had told them that in prior years that, and in prior projects, that we've given money for water and sewer extension, and that we would take it and recommend it to the Board of Aldermen, and that it has been passed before. Because they are expanding the public infrastructure. Probably what they would do is they just wouldn't run their water and sewer anywhere except for their project.
Right.
And so then you wouldn't be able to expand to the east. Their next step beyond this is expanding to the east. They're looking at crossing the creek. Is that correct?
That's my understanding of the
That's
eastern
Guilford
side of the
County.
creek.
I think it's Guilford County. I don't know if it picks it up, but if this is not approved and this, is this 710, is it to run it all the way to the east or just, it goes beyond their property, obviously, but.
It brings the water line up from the south along the creek that's out there that divides the property they're developing now and then the property to the east of the point of the triangle as it's referred to. So it would come up the creek and then serve their property, but then be available to be expanded to the east as well.
Yeah. And so they just, you wouldn't get the expansion to the east of there, which is.
Right.
You
When
know.
I read all this, it said that the water was coming from High Point. Is that correct? And where's the sewer coming from?
Sewer's coming from High Point also. Now with FedEx was a little different. FedEx had water from CCUC and sewer from High Point. The sewer in High Point, or the sewer for FedEx, punched under 40 and came out, and then it got to FedEx, and they ran it east and west as well. Same thing, same principle that they're doing here. FedEx ran it to the east, which opened up the parcel that Amazon is now on. And this will run to the east if they choose to run it, and we'll open up the other parcel there for future development.
How are we going to get this money back? You said we'd get it back in a year.
You would get it, depends on how much they develop, but you get it back in tax revenue, tax-based revenue. And this is not coming this is not coming from the general fund.
Right.
So it won't impact your general fund at all. This money it's what we've done is the water sewer fund, and it's a much bigger discussion than what I can get here in a couple minutes. But there's a rate differential on the sewer portion of the sewer bill. And that money goes into a fund that's held at city county utilities, and that is to be used for extension of sewer for these type purposes. So that money will come from that. It won't impact the town's general fund at all. And that's all you can use that money for. So if you don't use it for this, you're basically sitting there with nothing. And so we would get it back from the tax base that they're getting ready to put on the ground out there and somewhere down the road in future tax base. For instance, I think FedEx probably generates by itself, the Amazon building or FedEx, either one, probably generates close to $400,000, $500,000 a year in tax base, in tax revenue, because it's roughly Amazon's about a $60 million building. FedEx now is up to about 50. And I think North Point will have close to 100 million maybe on the ground.
Curtis, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, then we're going to use CCUC money that we're going to recover as town of Kernersville in the first year of increased tax.
Be the first, depending on the tax base, be the first year or two, yes.
Okay. So
And now we have to split this. That splits revenue with High Point because of a previous agreement with High Point that they provide the water and sewer. Otherwise, we couldn't serve this, and it would go to High Point. So we reached an agreement with High Point probably 15 years ago that says they provide the water and sewer to that area, the triangle, and then we split the tax revenue from it. We provide the services, police, fire, things like that. They provide the water and sewer, and then we split the services. So this one, the water and sewer, water and sewer both from High Point, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So it's a little different than the one with Trav Business Park. But we split this one with High Point. So depending on the tax base that goes on the ground out there, a year or 2 years to get that back. But we use the funding for, and that's what that fund was basically designated for. We went through different areas in town and said we need to extend the sewer out to this area. If we do this, it'll help development open up in that area. And so we've partnered with the private folks to do it when they come in to develop. And then some of it we've done our own. We've not done any of it recently on our own, but it's all been with private developers when they've come in to develop. Like I say, we did it with TDO, Trav Business Park. We did it with LaMille Flowers. We looked at it up on Mountain Street, but the developer decided not to do it. So, you know.
How do you come up with that number?
This particular number, we patterned it after what we did with Trav Business Park and FedEx. And it was basically break it down is we took what their total infrastructure cost would be and then looked at the total revenue they would generate. And we went in and said, okay, we can give you back up to half of your infrastructure cost. And we can generate back our revenue that we spend out. We can get that back in X number of years. We looked at it as I think back then, John, it was either a 7 or a 10-year payback, that if we gave them X amount of dollars, they generate X amount of revenue, then we get paid back our investment over a period of, I think then it was 7 years. This one's a little faster payback because we're giving them less money. Again, we gave Trav Business Park, I think, almost $2.5 million. This one's 710. So we base it on, you know, number one, what the infrastructure is going to cost. And the infrastructure has to be an extension of the public infrastructure. We wouldn't do this if it was just for their project inside their project. It's got to be something that somebody else can hook onto. And then we look at how much it costs, and then we say, okay, we can give you X amount. And Catherine went in on this one, and basically we looked at what we gave Trav Business Park per acre. And then I think she calculated out based on the number of acres on this one. Another one that we did was Dear Hitachi for the turn lane on Mountain Street. Came in and said, okay, the turn lane is X amount of dollars. You're building a new building. It's the new building that's beside of Manorwood. It's going to generate X amount of dollars in revenue. How soon is the payback? And generally we do it if it's within a 5-year to 10-year payback window. That's where we stick to on what we pay back.
So it's money that doesn't come out of our operating budget that can only be used for this, that we're going to get paid back in a year.
Correct.
Even I can, I need it explained to me that way.
Usually pretty good math. Okay. And we only do it if it's an extension of the public infrastructure. We've had several folks come in and ask for us to help run sewer to their place or water or whatever. But if we can't, extend it to where it opens up land for development, future land for development, that's the key. We want to open up something that would not otherwise be open. We won't do it, or we won't recommend it. Now it'd be up to the board to do it. And we've had several of those through the years that just wouldn't work. I mean, it's basically kind of, in a sense, just dead money. You just put money in and you're not getting any return on it. And you can see in the budget under governing body, there's a revenue source that comes in due from CCUC. And I forget how much it is, it's about $150,000. And then under governing body, there's a payment to, I think it's a payment to TDD or whoever of a matching amount. And it's what that is. It's where we're paying back Trav Business Park, the infrastructure, using the money from city county utilities. Now we're about running out of time to get the money back from city county utilities. We're going to have to absorb some of that one ourselves. We knew that going in, but we've been able to do that. And as they expand that sewer line out there at FedEx and Amazon, as they expand it, then we can still get money from city county utilities to pay them back. It's what we did with them was we just said, hey, we basically said we'll pay you back over a period of 10 or 15 years because it was such a crazy agreement. We had it based on percentage of tax base increase and everything else. We didn't do that here because they're already on the ground going. When we did Trav Business Park, we didn't know how long it was going to take to build it out. We know here they're on the ground going. So that's why we did it a little bit differently.
Now, this fund you're talking about, it says this is the only thing you can use it for. Is that the only thing you can use it for? Or
You
is
can
there
use
other
it-
uses?
You can use it for water and sewer activities. So we can use it to repair and replace lines that are old. We're using some of it actually to pave some roads that city county utilities went in and dug up until when they were doing the line bursting. So we can use it for water and sewer activities. We can use it for sewer extension, sewer expansion, water line expansion, but most of that is taken care of by city county utilities anyway, the repairs and everything. So it's what it's kind of narrowed itself down to is for projects like this where they're extending the lines. And so that's what that will be.
You can't use it like to reduce the rate or anything.
No.
Thank you, Curtis.
Did you want to speak to this? If you could tell everyone your name. Does anyone have any questions of Michael Johnson with North Point at this moment? Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve 1D.
Okay, I have a motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Penix. All in favor, raise your right hand. I've got 4 in favor, all opposed. Got Mr. Barrow opposed. Okay, item E is discussion regarding the HVAC system for the old library building.
Madam Mayor and Board, I think each of you have been made aware of the fact that the air conditioning system is out over at the old library. I think each of you has probably received emails or calls about the folks over there working are now starting to get hot during the day, which I can understand. It's about 90 degrees and no air, so getting hot. I spoke to the board, and the board asked me to get some quotes. I've gotten those quotes. You have one in your packet. There are several options. Some of them will work, some of them won't. The current system that we use is a chiller, which it is a big unit and it basically does what it says. It's a chiller. It makes the place cold. So we got a quote on a chiller. It's $400,000 or better. You've got to replace this one. There's no parts available. The one that's over there is worn out. And so we called. You're looking somewhere around a year, year and a half to get the chiller in, maybe 2 years. Again, it's cost prohibitive at $400,000, whatever it might be. Or I think it's cost prohibitive. Y'all may not. And if you tell me it's not, then we'll go that route. But they'll still have to wait to get it. The other option is putting some units on the roof. We looked at that. We stopped when we were told that we'd have to fix the roof to put the units on the roof. The roof's about $250,000. Again, to me, that's kind of cost prohibitive. But we can look at going that route. It's also a little bit longer. It's probably close to 6 months at least, if not longer, to do that. We looked at, and the one you have in your packet is 6 mini splits. What a mini split is it's got a unit outside. It's not as big as an outside air handler, but it's a unit outside. They run a couple lines inside, and then inside you have a unit on the wall. It heats and cools. It's cheaper than it's cheaper than the chiller, cheaper than the units on the roof. It's about $89,000. Now, that's not just for the mini splits. That's for the mini splits, the labor to install the mini splits, and to install a new panel box. That's a big problem we've got over there is the current electrical system panel box just won't carry it. So we got to upgrade the panel box. I think it's about $15,000 to $20,000 to do that, somewhere in that range. So it's $89,000 for that. That would be with all your heating and cooling. And if you all go that way, you can go any way. You can declare an emergency and we can go in and do it and get it started. Now, the other option that has been brought up is the option of installing window units in the building. The mini splits, the current chiller is 80 tons, is 80-ton unit, 40 tons upstairs, 40 tons downstairs. The mini splits are going to be somewhere around about 20 tons or so. Window units, we would need roughly, what did you say, Dorn, of the 24,000, we need what, 7, 10. The window splits, the mini splits are 7 mini splits. The window units, if we did the 24,000 BTU window units, we need 10. They're about $900 a piece, so you're looking at about $9,000 there. We can install most of those probably. Still got to upgrade the electrical panel, so you're looking at 15 grand, so you're looking at about $25,000 for the window units. The problem with the window units is on this side of the building, there's 4 small windows there that are 19-inch windows. A 24,000 BTU air conditioner won't fit in those. So you'd have to drop down to a smaller window unit. If the smaller you go, the more you're going to have. The windows in the front, all that would cool would be the offices. They've got an office partition set up to where the old checkout desk used to be. So that will not cool this part of the building to where all the volunteers are. In the front of the building, all it is office space. They utilize 2 offices. The front on this, or the back on this side, is where all the volunteers are, where they have their food, refrigerators, all that. So the ones in the front aren't going to reach anything. 2 of the windows on this side are in the Pattison room, which they can't use. So basically, of the 4 small windows, you can be able to use 2 on the side near the Penix building. The front windows, I mean, at that point, they won't cool anything but the office or the foyer, so you might as well just put 1 in there. And then you got on the side over near the chamber, you've got 4 of the big windows and 2 small. So the most of the 24,000 that you would get in there would be 4. So we can do window units. I don't know what the makeup would be. I don't think you can get enough window units in there to cool the place like it needs to be cooled. Will it be cooler than it currently is now? Yeah, I guarantee you, because it's hot now. It's probably 90 degrees in there during the day now if it's 92 outside. And again, this is just to do the upstairs. This is not anything downstairs. You know, downstairs right now is Crossroads Theater and Kernersville Little Theater using it. You know, they've got no lease. The only thing they've got is permission to use it. If it gets hot and they don't like it, they can have to pack up and go somewhere else and rehearse. The good thing is they use it primarily at night. It's in the basement. It's pretty cool anyway. So that's where we are on the library. I mean, options range anywhere from, you know, $25,000 for window units up to 400 or 500,000 and up. The board has asked, you know, what's our long-term use of the building? I don't know that. The board did say we need to start finding that out, and I agree. My suggestion will be, or I'll tell you now, kind of, it's going to depend on what the board wishes to do. If you wish to keep the building, then we're going to have to renovate the building, which means we're going to have to get an architect to design it. I think if we keep it, as much as it's going to cost to renovate it, the town needs to occupy it. So we would need to get an architect to come in and design it for office space. We're going to have to do that, you've got to get a mechanical engineer to come in and tell you, what are you going to do to heat and cool it? Because they're not going to suggest mini splits in the future for the building. I mean, that's not going to be your primary way to heat and cool it. So you get a mechanical engineer, you're going to have to get a structural engineer to come in and an electrical engineer to tell you about your electrical system, and then an architect. I can tell you, those 4 folks together is going to cost you probably $100,000 to $150,000. There's no money appropriated to get those folks in to design the building for future use. So, got to do that at some point. And then, once you get it designed, they can give you an idea of what it's going to cost to renovate the building. I'm just taking a wild ballpark guess, knowing what the heating and air is costing and what the roof's costing. You're looking at well over $1 million and probably closer to $2 million to renovate that building. So, board needs to decide, do we want to renovate the building? I wouldn't recommend leaving it sitting there vacant. Then it becomes a problem. So you really got to decide. That's something for future discussion, I believe, that the board needs to have and appropriate some money down the road. But what you need to decide tonight is if you want to use the building in the interim and allow a tenant to be in there, you're probably going to have to provide them with heat and air. Now, if you don't want to provide with air, let's say heat. The heat works right now, not in the wintertime. But if you want a tenant in there, you're going to have to provide them with air. I mean, nobody's going to stay in it without air conditioning. So I think you have to decide, do we want someone to use it in the interim until we make a decision on what we want to do with it down the road? I will tell you that if you said tonight that we want to renovate the building and use it for town offices, you're probably a year away from that happening because it's not in the budget. I could put it in the budget. You're going to have to appropriate the money to make the payments on the loan, but you can't get it designed and everything in a year anyway. So you're a year away from that happening at best. My guess is probably 2 years away. And when you find out the cost of it, unless the board just wants to bite the bullet and appropriate the funding for the payment or whatever, you might be 4 or 5 years away because of the cost to renovate it. So I think you have to make a decision on something that will work to cool it and something that will last a little while and something that can be done fairly soon if you want them to be cool in the summer, this summer. So there's only 2 options. That narrows it down pretty quickly to 2 options that you can do this summer. That's the mini splits or the window units, or open the doors up and turn the fans on. That won't keep them cool, but it will kind of stir around the air. So that's where we are there. We can do the mini splits starting tomorrow. We can do the window units starting tomorrow if we can find that many and get them to fit in the window. And I think one board member asked me, and I've got it somewhere here in my supplies, about the responsibility of those window units, because I think you all were getting or the responsibility of the air, y'all were getting some calls and whatnot from folks. And it specifically says in our lease agreement, and we wrote it this way, knowing that at some point in time, the air conditioner was going to break. I mean, it'd been breaking all along. We knew it was sometime in the making. So it's under Section 7, subsection D. It says it is agreed that if the expense to repair a problem is more costly than what either the leasee or lessor is willing to incur, then the lease, as above set forth in paragraph 1, shall be terminated by either of the parties. So that means that if it costs too much to fix it and this board doesn't want to fix it and Salvation Army does not want to fix it, then y'all have the option to terminate the lease. I will tell you that Salvation Army has indicated that they do not have the money to fix it. So that's where we're at.
What year was that lease signed, Curtis?
That was signed October the 2nd of 2019. So they got by pretty good, almost made it 3 years.
Before COVID.
Correct.
And so
right before
I think
COVID.
there's a lot of there's different circumstances based on when we signed that and what the situation was then based on where we are now. And I think we've known what the Salvation Army has been able to do and how many families they've been able to feed in our community for a long time. But with inflation and with COVID, I've never seen a line as long as they have backed up over there to get food. And that's concerning to me that I can't imagine. And what's their lease? Like $3,500 a month or something like that?
Yeah, I think it's 3,500 and we pay the power.
Yeah.
So
If we're paying
our
the power,
expense will go down if we don't have any air over there. So
well, not if we're using air conditioning units in a window, it's not going to go down. That's
no,
absurd.
that won't bring it down much. It may actually.
I think we have a duty to the citizens that need that service to provide air conditioning for them to stay where they are. That's my opinion. And I don't think air conditioning units and windows is the way to go. I'm not sure what the power bill difference between mini splits is versus window units. I'm sure it's not $70,000 or whatever the difference would be, the cost between the mini splits and the air conditioning units, but it would be considerable.
And we anticipate the power used by the mini splits will be significantly less than what the chiller is doing.
Right.
So, you know, it's came down some. The reason we pay the power bill is because it's all 1 meter. And so when the Shepherd Center was in the basement, everything gets, with it on 1 meter, we just pay it. But we anticipate it coming down significantly from what it is right now with the window splits versus the chiller. But with the window units, they're obviously not as economically efficient, so to speak. But you are correct. Their line has gotten longer in the last, well, it's picked back up. So, you know, you can see what they do every day. It's not hard to, or the days they give food, it's not hard to see that. Somebody asked me, are we allowed to fix it given the lease? And I think the lease pretty much states that, yes, you can do that because it says if it's more costly than what either the leasee or lessor is willing to incur. So that gives the town the option of doing it. I think it's just up to the town as to whether or not to do that. And, you know, the mini splits, I've been asked what do we do with them once, if we put them in, the board approves it, what do we do with them once we're done with them in the building? Depending on how long they stay in that building, you know, if it's 2 or 3 years and we take the mini splits out, we have some mini splits in some different facilities that the town owns. We could use them as backups or whatever, or we take the unit out and sell it. I mean, we've had good luck in the past selling some things that were no longer used like that, so we can sell them. They, of course, won't bring what we pay for them new, but we can get some of our money back.
What was the total cost again, Curtis, for those window splits?
Excuse me?
What was the total cost?
$89,400 is the estimate.
Compared to $25,000 for window units, that's not going to be as effective as
That's our rough guess on the window units. We feel pretty sure that we would have to do the same upgrade to the panel box, and you know they're running about $900 a unit for the big ones. Is what we don't know is kind of how many of the big ones we'll have to have versus how many of the small ones. So we may end up having to have more than 10, you know, just depending on the makeup. And then we're not real sure. The problem we've got is along the back side here, because there's no windows to put a window unit in. So because the bathrooms are here, it'd be nice if there was on that side, because that's kind of where they use some of it. But so window units, you're going to have to cool it primarily from the side over near the chamber and the back half on that side.
And right now, you only have 4 windows that can accommodate the size window unit that we need.
We've got 6, but we think
You'll need 10.
two of them wouldn't do anything because they would go into the Pattison room, and they don't utilize the Pattison room. We keep it locked. So basically, yes, 4 that we think would work. And it may be that in the smaller windows, we could get a small enough unit to fit in there, but I don't know what size it would be and how well it would cool. I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
And the construction cost to expand the windows to accommodate the air conditioner, is that a thought? Is that a possibility? I'm just thinking.
make
Window
the smaller windows bigger.
bigger to accommodate,
Um,
what would be the construction cost?
more than what the mini splits be.
Okay,
And we've tried that trick of fitting windows in a hole that it doesn't belong in, and that'd be about what you're doing with air conditioning unit. Yeah, it won't work too good.
thank you.
Curtis, I got a question or two here. As you know, I'm the one that told you why not put window units in the building.
Yes, sir.
Number one, it requires half as much wiring
Yes, sir.
because the units take 220 and they plug in. It's
Mhm.
very modular. Whereas these mini splits, the installation costs as much as the mini split, correct?
Just about. I'm guessing it's usually about, if the mini split's 4,000 installation and wiring, depending on where it's at, it's probably 2 to 3.
Right. And as far as the air conditioners go, you can get them up to, I believe, 28 or 30,000 BTUs.
Correct.
That are just as efficient as these mini splits are. And the mini splits, the way they work is it's just got the blower inside. You just got a little more adjustability about where you put it, but you still got to put the outside unit, correct?
You still have the outside unit. Yeah, now some of them allow you, if you get a big enough outside unit, you can run 3 heads off of that unit inside.
Right.
And so I don't know, honestly don't know which way they quoted it, if it's 7 individual outside units or if it's like 3 outside units running 2 heads inside. I'm not sure which way, but I do know you can run, if the outside unit itself's big enough, you can run 3 heads inside.
I think the thing we have to look at here is if we want to keep them cool, we want to do it as cheaply as possible. I think that's something that we would expect, the people of Kernersville would expect us to do.
And that's
And
up to this
I
board.
think I'm an advocate for the window unit, doing it through window units, because it costs less. It's not ideal, but neither are the mini splits. You know, it's ideal to fix a forced air system that works in the whole building, but we're not going to do that at this time. That's my thought, and I've shared that with you, and I wanted to share it with the board.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry. This all year should be able to run a load calculation or manual J, whatever you want to call it, to see what's going to be the most efficient way to heat that area or that square footage based on a mini split. They'll tell you basically how much you'll need to cool that area. If that's the case, surely they can run it and go, hey, look, these mini splits are going to do this amount for you and you're going to stay cool. Or we can put window units in here and you're going to have half the space and half of it's going to be cool and the other half's going to be 95 degrees. That would make sure that we're doing it the most efficient, or it's being designed the most efficient way.
We asked them that question about the mini splits versus the window units, and to my knowledge, Dorn, they said that they did not think the window units could cool it adequately, correct? The mini splits will cool it much better than the window units. Now, granted, the mini splits still aren't going to cool it like the chiller did when it was working at 100%, because it's just not as big. But like John said, I mean, the only true way to cool the thing like it has been cooled in the past is to do the chiller. In my opinion, that's, for many reasons, that's not an option here tonight. So they did look at it. They looked at, the load that it needs, what we need. And I mean, the mini splits, of the options, the mini splits would do that as well as anything. It is more expensive than the window units, but it's going to cool it quite a bit better than the window units will. Now, if the windows, if you had all 31-inch windows over there, and you had some windows on the backside, then you could get window units in all of those, because you're going to need 10 window units anywhere you go, and we've only got 10 windows, 12 windows. So if you had enough windows positioned where they need to be and they were big enough that you could get the big BTUs in, like Alderman Barrett said, I mean, if you could go in there and get the 30,000 BTU, if you could get them and get them positioned correctly, that might work. As good as the mini splits. The problem being with the windows, the small windows, there's no way you can get it in there because I think the 24,000 BTU takes like a 31-inch wide window, 28 to 31, depending on the unit. So you just can't get them in the little ones. So if you had more big windows positioned differently, you might can make that work as good, but that's just not what we're dealing with because John's exactly right. I mean, putting them in, I mean, once you upgrade the panel box and you upgrade your plug-in, you know, you're going to have all 220 plugs for those big BTU units. They're not that expensive to put in. Once you get them in and you got the plug there, there's no installation. I mean, he's exactly right. There's no running any lines or anything. You stick them in, plug them in, and go. But there would be some, still you've got to get you would have to get the plug in there, and you still got to upgrade your panel box because it just won't carry it. But you got to do that anyway. So our problem is we just can't get big enough units positioned correctly to work. Now, you can put them in. I mean, it's entirely up to the board. We can go in there and we put big ones in the windows that big ones will fit in. You know, the 24, 30,000. If we can get a 30,000 and get it in there, we can put it in the 4 big windows. And we can get little ones and put them in all the little windows and turn them things on and tell them it's as good as it gets. That's all we're doing. And if you're not cool enough, standing over here in the middle of the building, go over there near the air conditioner. I mean, that, I don't know. Other than that, I don't know how you would do it other than just say, this is what you're going to get, and you're not as hot as you once were.
Madam Mayor, before I can get to the issue about which choice is best for us to do on behalf of the town, a couple of things have been weighing pretty heavily on me the last 2 or 3 weeks. One is that that this board has once again allowed itself to be placed in a position of being someone who opposes something that's unopposable, such as feeding as many people as the Salvation Army feeds. We're allowing ourselves to be manipulated into a dichotomy of either looking after those hungry people or turn your back on them. And I don't like our having been put in the position now twice, if not 3 times, of being manipulated like that. And I certainly would pledge to my colleagues on the board that I'm going to do everything in my power to stop that process. But the Shepherd Center serves hundreds of people every year by delivering meals, by taking people who don't have transportation to doctors or medical appointments and all that. It's a noble mission that the Shepherd Center serves. The Salvation Army serves a noble mission by feeding this group that we're talking about. But it might not be the most popular thing to say, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that while it is important to those of us sitting up here to see that those populations continue to be served, it is not the town's responsibility to see that they are. There's a difference between being responsible for it and being supportive of it. And I think that we're looking at a situation where those parties who signed that lease agreement in 2019, Curtis, I believe you said, all big boys and girls. Every one of them could read. Everybody at the table, I believe, understood the obligations that they were undertaking in terms of that lease agreement, including the responsibility to pay for maintenance of mechanical systems if they went down during the term of the lease. So we certainly have, I think, expectations on the part of those folks who we represent to do things that are supportive to organizations whose responsibility it is to serve those populations. But I would contend that we do not, as a town, have the mission or the obligation to see that they do that. And I think we've allowed ourselves again to be placed in a posture of either being the bad guy or being the hero, with nowhere in between. The lease, and I want to just, Curtis, I want to underscore as I'm talking through sharing my thoughts here, that lease requires the Salvation Army to be doing this repair without contribution from the town, subject to either party being able to walk if they don't want to do it. Is that an accurate?
That is accurate. There's also a section in there, in that same paragraph, section 7, care, maintenance, and repairs. There's two before the one that I read there, A and B, and A says the leasee shall be responsible for repair and maintenance of the plumbing system, HVAC, and electrical wiring system of the premises during the terms of the lease and any extension of the lease. And then the leasee shall maintain and keep in a good state of repair, reasonable wear and tear and damages by casualty expected, at its own expense, all other parts and portions of the premises during the entire term of this lease and extensions thereto, including regular replacement of HVAC filters, replacement of any broken glass, and necessary replacement of any light bulbs. So there's a couple of subsections in there that speak to it before the section that says either the town replaces it or they replaces it, and if neither one of them want to replace it, you walk.
Well, yeah. And my point is this, is that contractually, we don't have a contractual obligation to contribute a dime to this. Now, there are those who have gone to great lengths to paint us into a corner of being in a position that if we don't do this and don't pay for all of it and don't spend $90,000 worth of the citizens' money, that we're somehow being unsupportive or immoral or unethical or whatever the terms those individuals choose to apply to this decision. But we have let ourselves be played, in my opinion, now for a third time into a position of being put as either being the bad cop or the good cop with nothing in between. And I think that is a usurpation of the powers of this board and of the responsibilities of it. And I will say it very unqualifiedly that I don't like it. Don't know that we can control it, but we sure don't have to continue to bow to it. So I gotta get to that part before I can decide which one would be the best choice. Now, let's assume we've gotten over that, and we're now in a position of making the decision whether to support, what to do about our building. I talked last week, as I have with a number of our colleagues up here, and I basically asked one or two of them, help me get my head around this. What are we being asked to really decide here? And one of the seasoned members of this board shared with me, in his view, or in her view, that this is a decision about, are we going to take action to maintain and preserve the value of a town asset? That helped me immensely, because that's what I really think this decision is about. Now, that may get us to the same spot, but I don't want to be painted into a corner that if we don't completely ignore a covenant under that lease agreement, that all of a sudden we're being bad guys. That's just not true, and it is so unfair to everybody involved. And frankly, it's unfair to the Salvation Army and to the people who line up around here in their cars to pick up food on a weekly basis. So it has really helped me to think of it in that context, and that may or may not take me to the same conclusion. But I really would encourage my colleagues to consider this based on the merits of what we need to do to preserve and maintain an asset of the town that may have some significant future value to the town. I really do think the citizens of this town, and Chris, I respect so much what you said, that I think the citizens of the town have an expectation that we support it. But I don't think it's an either or situation. I think there are ways that we can support it. I've got to get over that first hurdle before I can really embrace the responsibility of the town to do it. Enough said, and I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, but I've got to get to that point before I can stick my hand up. Thank you.
Mr. Penix?
I'd like to follow up on what Bill and John said. I have a somewhat same perspective on part of that as Bill. I look at that library as a town asset that we have to preserve. It's right in the middle of Kernersville. It's visible in the middle of town. Forget that it's even leased. It's a building that we own. And as it stands right now, if it were vacant, it's not leasable because it has no air. So whether it's rented now or not rented now, it's got to be fixed. It can't just sit there. I like the economy of John's idea about window units. But I think in this day and age, to see a building in the middle of a downtown we've worked hard to try to beautify for years, to have a building like that sitting right in front of our town hall with window air conditioners sticking out is not even in my thoughts right now. I can't imagine how that would look and how it would make Kernersville look. I think it would make us look like we were going back in time. Boy, we used to have windows on the second floor in downtown Kernersville, and all of them had window units sticking out of the top of the windows, and you're afraid they were all those units were going to fall on you one day. I just think we're past window air conditioners. So I think it's got to be fixed. I don't think you have to justify it by who it's serving or who's leasing it. I think just for a valuable asset the town has right in the middle of town, it's got to be maintained. We have to maintain our own. So that's the way I feel.
Go ahead.
I know maintaining the town property is necessary, and people have various opinion about how I need to go about taking care of that building up there and whatnot. I just don't want ever to lose sight of the mission of the people inside that building and what they're doing for the people here in Kernersville that may be less fortunate than other folks. As a person who used those facilities back in the day, the Salvation Army and whatnot, I know what it does for a family. And anything that we can do to make that better for the people who are up there serving the community that might appear to be a bit marginalized during this time in our economy and whatnot, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we're here to serve the people. And that's all the people, regardless of their social, economic position in the community. And I think that the Salvation Army does a very good job of meeting the requirements and the needs of some of our marginalized people in this community. And I don't want this board to ever lose sight of the importance of that. And if it takes $89,000 to fix the building so they can continue with the mission up there that they're doing for the folks in Kernersville that can't afford food and things of that nature, then so be it. It's $89,000, and I don't put $89,000 before I put the people in Kernersville. And that's my opinion.
Do you want to make a motion?
That being said, yes, I would make a motion that we move to fix the building up there with the cost of $89 to bring it to a state where it would cool the building for the people who are there, if that's acceptable.
So the mini splits option.
Yes. Yes. That's the one that I make a motion to. Yes.
Okay, I've got a motion by J.R. Gorham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Thompson. All in favor, raise your right hand. Okay. All opposed. All right, I have Alderman Thompson, Apple, Gorham, and Penix in favor, and Alderman Barrow opposed.
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Sure.
I think for Ed. We're obviously going to go ahead with this, going to do this. Once we do that, if the town develops a need for that building in a shorter period of time than the remaining term on the existing lease, is there a legal way that we can get there if we need the building for something other than whatever it's being used for?
I'll answer.
Please.
For him, it's okay because he's not familiar with the lease. Maybe it's a month lease, so we can give them 30 days notice and they're out of the building.
Thank you.
7 days notice.
No, it says in here 30.
Oh, it says that in there.
Curtis, your microphone is off.
We just gave them 30. It's correct. On month is 7. We gave them 30 because of what they have in the building. They would need more than 7 days to get it out, really.
So to answer your question, we give 30 days notice and they'd have to move out.
Well, Madam Mayor, I think one thing that's a really good sign about the health of these colleagues that I'm pleased to serve with up here is that I think probably we had at least 3 different votes to get to the same end for 3 different reasons. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are moving on to the consent agenda. 2A is approval of minutes for the April 19 special session. B is approval of minutes for the April 27 regular meeting. C is approval of minutes for the May 4 regular meeting. D is consideration of a lease agreement with Women's Club for the Kernersville Community House. And E is consideration of a contract extension for banking services with PNC Bank. F is consideration of Forsyth County tax refunds. Mr. Apple has indicated previously he has a family member employed with PNC Bank. I think Mr. Powell has indicated that's not a conflict. Oh, I'm sorry, PNC. So that's different than Pinnacle. No, it doesn't.
That's
Okay.
a different bank.
Different bank, okay. My apologies. All right. So we've got the consent agenda. So Mr. Apple has no conflict because his family member works for a different bank. All right. So items 2A, B, C, D, E, and F. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to see any of those items removed? Seeing none, is there anyone on the board who'd like to see any of those items removed and considered separately? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Thompson. Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Penix. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. All right, moving on to the briefing on the June 7th meeting agenda. We'll have a ceremonial presentation and then we'll move on to public hearings. We have item A, zoning docket K800, Justin Love, agent for George Gibson, owner, for property at 602 Fairview Street. We have a public hearing on the UDO relating to high-density development standards, zoning docket KT 269. Does anyone have any questions about either of those cases? Or Catherine, do you have anything to comment on either of those?
Both of these cases were at the May Planning Board meeting. Item A, the rezoning is a general use rezoning, so there's no associated site plan, and that was not recommended for approval by the Planning Board. The text amendment was recommended for approval by the Planning Board.
Okay, are there any questions by board members on either of those items? All right, C will be the public hearing on the budget, as Mr. Swisher has indicated. Are there any questions about that? All right, 2B is a continued discussion for May 4th relating to Atkins Farm Road rezoning, zoning docket K 798. Mr. Swisher, could you address its placement on the agenda and what will happen with that zoning item?
Yeah, the public hearing on this item was closed at the May 4th meeting, and the board asked for it to be continued. It was continued to this meeting, I think, at the request of the developer. It is not a public hearing because the public hearing was closed. If we were to reopen the public hearing on it, we would have to go back through the process of re-advertising it and everything else. So what will happen is when this item comes up, if the board is interested in hearing from the developer about any changes or any new thoughts for his development, the board will need to ask the developer if he has any of those to present, and then he can come up and present those. If the board wishes to then hear from the neighbors regarding their thoughts on those changes, the board will need to ask the neighbors to have a representative come up and speak also. They can sign up to speak as well as a regular speaker on that agenda item. So if they all sign up to speak, then you wouldn't have to ask anybody to come up, but I think it's 15 minutes total. The mayor divides the time up. So I think it'd probably be better, not necessarily better, but it would probably give a more fair chance for the board to ask those individuals, do you have anything? We continue this. Have you made any changes to your development? And then ask the neighbors, is there anything you would like to say regarding that? Of course, if they're signed up to speak already, the mayor has the option to call them up to speak. If he gets too far into, we'll just have to see what changes he's brought back, new things that he's recommended. But if he gets too far into a lot of changes and everything with the plan, then it will have to be determined, is it enough changes that it warrants going back through the whole process, through the planning board, new site plan, all of that. I've not heard anything from the developer regarding any changes that he might be bringing forth, so I don't know. You all may have, but I have not.
Is one way to approach this to ask our community development staff to contact the developer following this meeting to find out if there's any proposed changes and whether or not they would have recommended those changes?
Yeah, I think certainly we can do that, and because if it's a lot of changes, it might be basically a new plan that does need to go back. So we can contact Ms. Garner, can contact Mr. Michaels and see if he's got any changes. If he does and he wants us to share those with the board, we can certainly send that out to the board to let you all know what the changes might be.
If there's any changes that could be posted online with the agenda item, that would be of interest too, I think.
Yeah, we'll see if he has those in a way where we can post them.
Okay. Will that work for your?
Yes, I can contact Mr. Michaels. We did speak last week. He was still working with the neighbors and was in communication with them, so he did not have anything to provide by the end of last week, but I will reach out to him again.
Okay, does the board have any other questions on that matter, that agenda item? Okay. All right, item 2C is consideration of ordinance for budget amendment number 8.
We'll have the information for the budget amendment loaded up hopefully tomorrow or Friday.
Okay, item D is consideration of an ordinance to proceed with demolition of a building at 908 East Mountain Street.
Yeah, this is the building that used to be it's the former Dudley Inn and I think the Phoenix Hotel. You have the ordinance for demolition in your packet, but you also have in your packet a memo from our zoning administrator, Ms. Campbell, to Mr. Powell, Ms. Garner, and Mr. Cleaton regarding the building. And the memo kind of outlines how we got to where we are. This has been going on now for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. As you can see, back in March of 2020, our building inspector went out and cited them due to the following issues: liability to fire, criminal and nuisance activity, decay and lack of maintenance, lack of adequate security, and sprinkler and fire system malfunctions. They were issued an order to repair April of 2020, given a completion date of October of 20, and it was extended once. Nothing happened. I mean, nothing's happened yet regarding that. Had an arson committed on January of 2022. They basically set a fire in 3 areas of the hotel. I will tell you that the building they were issued an order to demolish January 2022, deadline of February. We granted them an extension to March of 2022. They did nothing. We've had a lot of problems with this building, had a lot of vagrants in it, a lot of homeless folks in it. Obviously, we've had a lot of drug activity in it, had a couple of drug overdoses, a lot of illegal activity taking place in it. Been boarded up, boards taken down, been chained up, chain taken down. Just an ongoing problem. Mr. Powell contacted an attorney for the owner, told the attorney, if you'll bring us a signed contract with a real estate broker to list the property for sale. This is several months ago. Told him, if you'll have it to me by next Friday, which would have been 10 days, then we won't proceed forward. The attorney told Mr. Powell he would have it to him. Still not gotten anything to him. They're down there right now tearing out some areas that were burned in the fire. A lot of things. I don't think they have any intention of demolishing the building. The building, in my opinion, and I'm not a building inspector, but in the building inspector's opinion, it can't be renovated the condition it's in. There's a lot more wrong with it now than when he went out there in March of 2020. At this point, it's cost prohibitive to go in and renovate the building. The best choice for that building is for that building to be down. They stand a much better chance of selling the property with the building torn down than they do with the building there. So at this point, they've not done anything. We have some liability associated with it now that we've been down there. So Mr. Powell suggested that we adopt an ordinance to demolish the structure and move on with it. The town, of course, would bear that cost, and we would put a lien on the property. So once it's sold, we would recover that. It continues to be a nuisance. It continues to be an eyesore in that area of town, and we need to do something with it. This is not the first time the town has ordered a building be demolished. We demolished one right off Macy Grove Road on the old Greensboro Road. We demolished one at the corner of North Main Street and Oak Street. We've demolished a couple of residential houses. We don't want to get to this point, but at some point in time, when you have an owner that's not willing to do anything, you get to that point. They still do pay property tax, not necessarily on time, but they pay property tax. The building itself is valued at about $1.8 million. They pay roughly on the building in Kernersville taxes, roughly about $12,000, $13,000 a year. I think the total value of the other buildings that are down there, this building and all of the land, somewhere around about $5 million. So county and city both, they pay about $35,000, $40,000 in taxes. And we'll tell you, there are 3 more buildings down there, just up a little bit to the east from the hotel. two of those aren't in any better shape and probably worse shape than the hotel. In fact, I think two of them have been condemned as well. So it's unfortunate. I mean, it was a thriving area, but in the last few years, it's went down pretty quickly. I was looking the other day with Alderman Barrow, and I think the last time anybody was in there was at 2017 when we saw that the school was in there. They had an academy, basically a sports academy in there, where athletes that were kind of at the top of their class in basketball and soccer, I believe, came. Again, had a lot of issues regarding the housing. There was a lot of issues regarding that. And basically, they kind of told Alderman Barrow it looked like they walked into their office one morning and about 11 o'clock decided, we're done. And they got up and walked out, and you can go in. And the last time I went in it, Chief Summers and I went in it. I mean, everything was still in there, just like they got up that day at 11 or 12 o'clock and walked out the door, and that was it. And that's how it's been, except for the homeless folks that have occupied it. The homeless folks had a good deal going there at one time. They had the power on and water. They beat sleeping on the street in cold weather. And it had the mattresses from when it was a hotel or a dormitory room. It started out as a hotel when it was Dudley Inn, when it was Dudley Cosmetology University. It was a dual purpose hotel / dormitory for the ladies that were there at the university. Then when Mr. Dudley sold it, it went back to being, it started out and quickly transitioned. It started out again as a hotel type building, and then it quickly transitioned to the high school academy type deal. And since 2017, it's really been nothing but a nuisance pretty much. So we're asking the board to approve to demolish it. Certainly, if the board would like more time on it, give them another deadline, we can do that. But our recommendation is to go ahead and approve it and then get started on it because, they're down there working right now, but I think that's because this is on the agenda. I think if this was not on the agenda, it would still be the same circle that we're running around in.
I got one question. You know what lien position we would be in if in the event that we tore down and filed a lien?
What lien position?
Well, we give notice, and all that kind of thing.
I guess what I'm saying, is there anything owed on? Is there anybody else?
I have no idea.
As far as us,
we've not done a title search.
Right. So, I mean, are we the fifth person in line to get money back from this? That's my concern.
Well, I don't know about that, but, in all fairness, the town and staff have been extraordinarily bent over backwards to try to work with them. The order to repair was issued 26 months ago. And we've extended, and tried to give them an opportunity to do something. And during that time, we've had 2-3 fires and the town is getting a liability possibility here that we don't want to find ourselves in at all.
Sure. Thank you.
Curtis, you may mention that they're down there doing some type of repair or something. To what magnitude is that being done, or what is it exactly that they're doing down there at this time?
Yeah, oddly enough, they have a permit for demolition. I think that's correct. And it's what they're doing is they're tearing out, to my knowledge, I haven't been in there, rode down there, Mr. Powell and I rode down through there the other day. They are tearing out the areas that were set on fire. And when you go in the front door, that area was set on fire. And then I don't know if they set them in each area, it looked like it, but you kind of jump a little bit. And then the middle portion of the first floor was set on fire. And then the eastern corner of the building had a fire. So I think they're down there. What it looks from what they're bringing in and out is they're tearing out those areas, which basically be the whole first floor that was set on fire. And
how long have they been down there doing that?
I don't recall.
The permit was issued within the past couple of weeks, so it hasn't been very long. And they framed it to us, and when they applied for the permit, as an interior demolition to scope the fire damage. So it hasn't even extended to what extent the repairs would be. It was just more of the exploratory demolition to find out how much has been damaged and what the repairs would require. They have not submitted for any construction permits to remediate any repairs that they discover. So it's just the demolition.
Thank you.
Would the board like to move that to a later agenda in June to give them more time to make some progress?
I
Or
would
is
make
it
that
more
motion.
advisable to go ahead and be enforcing to encourage the landowner of the immediacy of their problem?
Madam Mayor, I think, like we've said, that been given adequate opportunity already, and everything they've done is with intention of stall and delay.
Right, but there's this recent permit they just got.
Like she said, that is only for purposes of demolition and not repair. Repair of this facility would involve probably millions of dollars.
Are they aware that this is on our agenda for June 7th?
They are aware. We have made no claims that, if you do this, then this. Of course, if they make the repairs, then we would not want to see demolition move forward. But at this point, we've reached the end of our process, and we've told them, we'll give you the demo permit, but we have to move forward. This is what's required of us. And so the only way to fix it is to fix the building. So if they were to make significant progress, then there would be no need to tear it down. But at this time, the only permit that's been issued is that recent demo permit for just their exploration.
Okay, so perhaps they may come to the June 7th meeting and explain their point of view. Is that
Perhaps.
possible?
Sure.
It's possible, yeah, they know it's on there. They've not contacted anybody in regards to anything other than to get the permit. They've not said, hey, we've got this permit. How about giving us another 30 days or whatever? I mean, they know it. It's just the same thing they've done all along. I mean, they've got an owner that's in another state. I think he's out of Maryland or Washington, D.C. And I mean, there's nothing changed since 2020. And it's just really not much changed since about 2018. We just really got involved in it in 2020. It's like Mr. Powell said and Ms. Garner said, I mean, the cost to fix that building is, you're not going to be able to fix that building any cheaper than what you can tear it down and build another one. And the land is just unfortunate. I mean, the land and the parcel is worth more with that building gone than it is with that building on. It's a very similar situation to what the town had at the corner of Cherry. It's a much smaller dollar figure, but at the corner of Cherry and Mountain Street with the gas station that's now a parking lot. I mean, it's just simple way it was worth more with the building gone than it was with it on it. And that's what we're facing down here. But I, in my opinion, if they're interested at all in not having to tear their building down, we'll know how interested they are. They'll be here June the 7th. If they're not here June the 7th, they're not real interested in it. If I had a building and I owned it and I didn't want the town to tear it down, I'd be at the board meeting saying, hey, don't tear my building down.
And they certainly had adequate notice. We've given them multitudinous opportunities to do something.
I think Alderman Thompson's comment was a very relevant question, and maybe I'm thinking about it too simplistically, but if we're going to pay to tear it down to get into a third or fourth lien position to enrich the position of a developer from DC being in a better position to do something with the property, that, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And that, I mean, that's just a legitimate concern, I think. And maybe if we could, Chris, does it make sense for us to ask if we could sort of get a read on that at the June 7th meeting? I mean, I just think we need to know whose pockets we're enriching.
Yeah. It wouldn't be nothing to do a title search on it to find out what liens are in front of us, right? I mean, it's just going over to the courthouse and searching the deed and.
Yeah, we can look and see. We can go to the courthouse and pull it up on the register of deeds and see.
Right.
The only thing I saw on it was there was one deed of trust. I didn't see anything else on it, but there might be something at the courthouse that's not showing on the register of deeds.
You might have liens from domestic cases. You might have liens from bankruptcy court. It's just all kinds of history there.
And like I say, I think the tax value on all of it together was right at either 4 million or 6 million. I realize that's a pretty good range, but I think it was, right at like 3.2 on the parcel that the hotel's on. And then like 2 something on the parcel beside of it. And then like 300,000 or 400,000 on a remnant parcel that was left after DOT closed the road. So we'll check and see what we can find out as far as liens in front of us.
I'd also like to know what it's going to cost to demolish all of that if we're going to wind up paying for it.
That would be, we won't have that quote by Tuesday, but it's what we will do is once if the board approves the order to demolish, we'll go out and take quotes on it and we'll bring that back to you all. If it comes in and it's too high, you don't have to approve it. We won't demolish it, but we won't have that by Tuesday. It'll take a little while to work that quote out.
And once we demolish it, if that were to happen, then the lien goes on that piece of property, correct?
Yes, sir.
And town would get its money back when it's sold?
Correct.
Is there any way we could get our money back quicker?
I wouldn't
Can the
bet on
town
it.
foreclose on the property is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
it depends on again
lien.
what the deed of trust is on it currently.
Right. Because they paid their taxes every year.
Yeah.
They're just delinquent for this year only.
Yeah, they usually, like you mentioned, they usually run it
Wait to the last minute.
4 or 5 months behind, but they
Right.
get them paid.
But they paid them every year. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's on the agenda for the June 7th meeting, so we'll pick it up again then. All right, are there any questions about any of the items on the June 7th agenda? All right, seeing none, is there any further business before the board this evening? All right, let me go back. Town manager's report. Mr. Swisher, anything tonight?
I have nothing tonight.
Okay, Mr. Powell?
Madam Mayor, we have a need for a closed session.
Okay. Mr. Penix, do you have anything tonight you'd like to say or present? Mr. Gorham?
No.
Mr. Apple? Mr. Barrow? No worries.
I've talked enough, but I'd like to say one more thing.
Okay.
In terms of the Salvation Army, they're doing a good job and they're doing good things for people. My point with the board and everybody is I wanted to do what we're going to do most economically. Not what's the easiest, what's the most economical thing to do. And as far as everybody talking ugly about window units, window air conditioning units, I was raised in a house with one. I remember when we got it, and I thought it was a wonderful thing. And still do to this day.
Y'all had window condition? Y'all had air conditioning?
Mr. Thompson, do you have anything
We had
tonight?
to roll over and roll back in it. That was your
Okay, looks like we've had a request for a closed session, so I will not ask for a motion to adjourn. I will ask for a motion for this closed session.
Got the paper. I had it. What did I do with it? Oh, thank you. Madam Mayor, pursuant to the North Carolina General Statute 143.318.11A3, I move that the board go into closed session to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, which which privilege is hereby acknowledged and pursuant to A5 regarding a contract concerning the purchase of real property.
I have a motion for closed session.
Second.
A second by Alderman Thompson. All those in favor, raise your right hand. It's unanimous. We will now go into closed session.